break is over.
When you went live last week, we were like right in a break between sessions in the conference. So it was like, perfect, I'm going to tune it in.
And you even asked a question.
I even asked a question. So, good afternoon. Everyone's tuning in right now to catch us for this week's Facebook Live Q&A with Pastor Shane Schlesman. I'm back in the hot seat, or actually,
He's
you're in the hot seat, having to answer the question. So, Shane got to take my role last week in interviewing Jeremy in regards to the previous week's sermon in regards to Find Family. And this week we're talking about Discover Purpose as part of this Culture Shock Growth Track 4-week series, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah, it's been a really great series so far. At least it's felt that way to me. I don't know, but it's felt that way to me. I've loved this. It's been really, really formative for me. I hope it has for everybody else too. But
I'm sure a lot of people appreciate the fact that this sermon series is just so practical, so like applicable to everyday life. Not that other sermon series aren't, but sometimes, of course, some are more theological or around biblical studies or so forth. You always bring practicality to every sermon that you deliver, but this especially, I think, is just you're painting such an incredible picture of how through a 4-week recurring series every month, how we're just going to become more and more empowered as a church to reach the lost and to love on one another as a great community. Yeah,
that's a really great opportunity for us as a church. And if you don't know this, we are taking the time to restructure what we've just walked through for the last few weeks in a sermon series called Culture Shock. And we're going to restructure around 4 central themes to help everyone grow and be integrated into the kingdom of heaven and into West End Assembly of God. And so we're going to help people and create an experience after church every Sunday on the first 4 Sundays of every month. And we're going to have Growth Track. And Growth Track is something we've actually studied from some other churches that have done this successfully. We've integrated it and really made it our own. And Growth Track is just a way, again, to focus on these 4 central themes: to know God, find family, discover purpose, and make a difference. So the first Sunday of every month after the service, we're going to have Growth Track, Know God. And that's going to be on the first Sunday of every month for 1 hour after the service. And then the second Sunday of every month is going to be Find Family. And we're going to discover what that looks like to find family in life and your spiritual walk, as well as here specifically at WEAG. And then week 3, Discover Your Purpose. We're going to actually help you discover what gifts you have and what things God has given you and what his intention is for you. And then week 4, Make a Difference, how you can get connected to actually doing the work that God intended. So that's we're not just a sermon series. This has actually set us up for a process of integrating everyone into the kingdom of heaven and specifically into West End Assembly of God. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, definitely. And this week, I think you tackled something that's so important, because I think there's that age-old question that pretty much everybody asks: what's the meaning of life, right? Why am I even here?
Why am I here?
Big third rock from the sun, right?
Yeah.
And so you talked about Discover Purpose as an individual and as a community within the frame of mind from God's purpose. For those that may have missed the sermon, would you give them just a quick rundown of what you covered? And then we'll delve into the questions.
Yeah, I talked about how we are created with purpose, and in that, as God from the very beginning, he put inside of us a special aspect of who we are that is able to accomplish a function. We actually looked at a letter that the Apostle Paul, a person who used to persecute the church and who used to kill Christians, who Jesus met in his life, and he met Jesus and it changed him forever, and he went from persecuting the church to actually promoting the church and found his true purpose. So the Apostle Paul himself actually is a great example of purpose taking over in your life. And we talked about a total purpose takeover really is where we led to of what it looks like when we're activated in our purpose, and then we give that over to God, and then how God gives us a purpose greater than anything we've ever been living for previously, and essentially takes over into everything I do. And when I live in that way, my life becomes a life of worship to God, a representative of someone who's giving their self to God and then being utilized by God himself.
Yeah. And Shane, you opened up the sermon with a story that I thought was very appropriate and sort of flipping the coin, starting with the bad side, if you will, is to, if we do not live out our purpose, if we do not find our purpose from the right sources and so forth, what can happen? You told a story about a Justin Sullivan that I think helps us tackle question number one, which is basically, what is the danger to us and to others if we have a void of purpose? And why is it so important that we be correctly, appropriately activated for purpose?
Yeah, Justin Sullivan is a sad story about a young man in North Carolina, and it came out on the news, a news story about a year or so ago, I think, or sometime in 2017. And Justin was just a regular kid in a small town in North Carolina, and he went to school, played sports, went to church. His dad served our country in the Marine Corps, and it was a very sad story of someone who really was losing sight of why, couldn't answer that question, why am I here? And eventually that caused a tension in his life that caused him to eventually leave school and have to be removed from his school. He became even greater loner. His parents were obviously super concerned, tried so many different things, and then the end of the story is even more sad, that ISIS ends up reaching out to Justin online, or he reaches out to ISIS in chat groups, and at first it starts as a curiosity that leads to being met to what Justin reported from the jail after being imprisoned for attempting or planning an attack that actually got thwarted, thank God. And his own father, who turned him in, whose heart was broken to watch his son go through this. But he actually reported from jail that I found with ISIS a place to belong and a purpose. And so if we don't have something that's driving us in purpose, I think our culture is desperately searching for purpose, and that's a dangerous search at times.
Yeah. In Justin's situation, and certainly like those that gravitate towards gangs, those are very extreme examples. But I think many of us find it difficult at times to realize what our purpose is and so forth. Why do you think that is so difficult for us to kind of see? Are we just being distracted by too many other things and such?
Well, that's a big part of it.
Okay.
I mean, try to figure out what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
When there's a million things you feel like you should be doing. From the time our kids are little, they're told to get involved in every single thing that's put in front of them, and they actually pursue, kind of like I've pursued hobbies in my life. I'm like all into this thing, and then I give up on it. I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. And then I'm like, oh, what you're doing now? Like, oh, now this is my thing. And we treat purpose that way. It's like, well, this is my purpose now. Well, this is my purpose, and it keeps changing. And there's never really any great purpose that's driving all the purposes. And that's what a relationship with God offers us. And I think it's difficult for two reasons. One is because of the multi-purposes that are out there. And two is because, I hate to sound like, the devil versus God. And for those of you who are like maybe weirded out by that kind of discussion, if there is a good God, then there's also an evil presence that exists as well. And that's all through God's story that's written and collected in the Bible. And we see that, and it makes sense that there would be an enemy that would say, not want you to find your purpose with God. So I think there's a lot of things warring against us to God has been so distracted itself.
Okay.
The structure of the church has turned a lot of people away. It's very sad, but it's a reality. Again, a part of that constant distraction. And I think the place truly that you can find your purpose, that overrides all purpose, is with God. And so that makes it a challenge.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This next question is rather personal for me, because, and I know from talking to other people through my life that others share the same thing, where we can be motivated by so many multiple interests. So many things can feel like, oh, that's my purpose. Oh, that's my purpose. That's my purpose. What would you say to somebody that's struggling with that, where they feel like there's so many open doors or things that they can do? How do they discern the path that they should be on?
Well, I know it's the pastor saying this, so it's kind of like maybe it doesn't take on as much meaning. So I'll say it to you as an 18-year-old Shane rather than a 50-year-old Shane.
Okay.
When I was 18, I was searching for purpose, and I was searching. I was really I would call myself desperate for it. I ran to every friend group and every next hobby and next. I wanted to be great in something. I wanted to be recognized. I wanted to find my place in this world. At the same time, I was experiencing so much pain from some of the things I had experienced in life that everyone goes through and experiences, in brokenness and a broken family and brokenness inside of me, and lots of horrible circumstances that made it more challenging. And I was overwhelmed with this sense of trying to find a true purpose that would be so true that it could even overtake those challenges.
Okay.
That could even overcome the things, that the mountains I had in front of me and the difficulty, and that I wouldn't be a victim of my past any longer, that I would have a purpose that drove me so deeply and enrich my life so much that that's all I could think about. It would consume me. And I found that in a relationship with God. I found that in realizing that Jesus gave up everything and made me and all of us his singular focus and purpose. Jesus came so that we might have life. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him would have everlasting life. That was the purpose of giving up everything. When I found that and I accepted that in my life, it changed everything.
Okay.
Now that's the beginning.
Yeah.
And I know it's a pastor saying that. That's what I preach on a regular basis. If you come to church here, you're going to hear that story weaved in some way, shape, or form. But we're also going to have the reality of like, hey, since I'm now 50-year-old Shane saying, hey, I've been through life now and it has beat me up, and I've realized, wow, you better have a strong compass pulling you through the tragedies of life, the difficulties of life, the sadness of life, the loneliness of life. If you don't have something pulling you, then everything else will. If you don't have, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. That's Jesus said that. Matthew recorded it in Matthew 6:33. But there's a flip side to that. If you don't seek first God's kingdom, you're going to seek everything. And you're going to keep seeking. So maybe you never find, Jesus said it this way, I'm standing at the door of your heart, or the center of your life, and I'm knocking. Whoever opens, I'm coming in.
Yeah.
And he has a purpose greater than any story that's been attempted to be written in your life. There's people right now who've been abused, who've been hurt, who've been left, who've been abandoned, who have hurts and then massive scars and wounds that go deep in their lives that end up affecting their purpose. And Jesus said, I came so that people would have life and that they would have it more abundant. He desires to go right to it and dive in with you and give you a purpose that could even overwhelm the greatest and the most tragic of circumstance.
Okay.
In fact, that's how we ended Sunday, was Romans 8:28. That's Paul's promise. Paul gave God's promise that he works all things together for good for the good of those who love him, according to his purpose.
Yeah.
His purpose is what he wants for you. And when you find that, it takes over everything, even tragedy.
Yeah. I want to delve into that a little bit more, but first I want to remind viewers that if you have a question for Pastor Shane that you would like him to answer during this few moments that we're with him live, please use the comments area to go ahead and ask your question now. It's certainly a lot easier to be able to go ahead and provide you an answer on the spot, but we always welcome your questions after the fact, so if you're watching this on demand or so forth too, at a later point in time, we still feel free to use the comments area to ask your question. So kind of extending a little bit what you were just saying, because you were saying, well, I'm in the role as a pastor, and the majority of us that are in here on a Sunday morning, this room behind us, are not in such a role. If the members of the church are all to be united in the purpose of the church, how does that translate into our lives outside of church? How does that extend beyond the church walls? And you made a distinction at one point in your sermon between career and calling. Yeah. And you didn't present it in such a way that you were saying abandon your career to go work at the church, but nonetheless you still called out the importance of calling over career. Can you expand on that a little bit more and tell us how do those that are viewing that are not in a church-related job
Thank
make this a reality?
Thank you for asking that, because it's so important.
Yeah.
I think our culture presents the options of pursue your passion and make that your career path, which makes complete sense. Who wouldn't want to get paid for what they're passionate about? Like, that's my dream for my kids too. Like, I hope they get paid for what they're passionate. I hope you find something you do for free and you still get paid for it. That's an amazing place to be. But we take it to such great lengths. Our passion becomes our career path, and then our career path ends up stealing our purpose. Because now you wake up 20 years later and you realize the purpose you're serving is not even your own. In fact, it's the career path you're serving, and they're taking your purpose. They're taking your gifts, the ones that God gave you, your gift to sell, your gift to talk, your gift to communicate, your gift to teach, and they are almost, it's like they're exploiting it for their use. And so God, I just tweaked it a little bit from my perspective of what God's looking for, and saying, rather than saying, let's find our passion and make it our career path, God desires for us to find our purpose and make it our calling. Now it flips. So if I'm pursuing my calling as a follower of Jesus, it is then to take God's purpose into my career path. So that's talk about flipping the script. You just flip. Now, are you gifted to communicate? Be a great communicator. Are you a gifted teacher? Be a great teacher. But don't let anyone take the purpose from you that God gave you, which is to take His purpose into your teaching. Now I'm not talking about, preaching to people in your classroom. I'm talking about living out like a kind of Mother Teresa, without words, to live a life that's so contrary to what everyone else has experienced, that your life would actually offer hope to other people because there's a purpose driving your life. That's you finding purpose and making it your calling.
You made reference a moment ago, Shane, when we talked about things that could get in the way of discovering our purpose. You mentioned even the church can sometimes be at fault for for people not discovering their purpose. So how do we, as church leaders and staff, perhaps better convey that purpose more frequently, the purpose of the church more frequently to a congregation, such that those that are in the harvest field are more readily equipped to convey that purpose to the lost?
We've got to get more personalized in purpose. So, if this makes sense. In fact, it's one of the reasons, Jim, we're implementing Growth Track in our church. Because what we found is, if we don't have a more intentional process to connecting people to their purpose, then we become about the product rather than the purpose. We become about filling a need. Like, we have 100 needs for this. We need you to sign up today. And we don't personalize purpose. That generalizes. That's corporate. You just fill up the list and get everybody doing it. We wanted to come alongside our people. So that's why we're inviting, in the third week of every single month in Growth Track, is going to be Discover Purpose. And we're actually going to take an assessment together and figure out, like, it's going to be an assessment that includes looking into your personality and how God made you that way. Everybody's wired a certain way, and all you personality gurus out there that love to talk about if you're yellow, red. We've got one right here on staff sitting in the room right now. She loves to talk about what number she is or what color she is.
She memorizes everybody's number.
Yes, and she knows your number.
She
and
does.
what number am I, Nikki?
You have to be a 3.
3. Okay, I'm a 3.
You're a 3 or an 8.
There you go.
3 or an 8. Oh, okay, well, those are very different. So, but we're going to help you discover. Nikki's not in charge of that, by the way, so don't worry. But we're going to help people discover their personality. Then what does that look like? Then in gifts. Scripture lists all of these. We've heard of gifted programs. This is the church's version of the gifted program, because we want to discover the way God made you. Some of you are gifted teachers. Some of you are gifted encouragers. You have gifted in hospitality. Now, all of these involve hard work and difficulty, but we want to help people come alongside them, find their purpose, and then activate them within that. Now, that's not perfect scenario. Sure. And there's more to that. I could get preached on a whole nother sermon, but that's what we desire to do, is personalized purpose.
Okay, very good. What happens to the church and those we care about when we resist God's purpose for our lives? What if we don't do all this that you're talking about? You mentioned at one point, you used an illustration of being injuring your hand.
Yeah.
And so I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask part B.
Well, I mean, actually, the Apostle Paul answered it.
Okay.
Which, again, is the perfect living example of a Justin, in North Carolina. And here's the Apostle Paul, who's given the purpose of following the law. And he followed it to the letter and to such a zealous degree that he became kind of a religious right radical and began killing the church in the name of his purpose. But then Jesus overwhelmed him with a purpose greater than his own story, and as he joined it, he becomes one of the most prolific authors of Scripture and inspired works of God that we have in the entire collection of inspired works of God, the Bible. He wrote a lot of the New Testament. So the Apostle Paul gives the illustration of what it does to the church family when someone doesn't use their purpose. And he relates it to what is called often in a lot of his letters as the church as a body. So body has many parts and many members, he says in Romans 12. Each one serves a different purpose. Do I really need my finger now? Well, rip it off and find out. That's very painful.
Don't do this at home.
Okay, it's torture or whatever. It's what I can imagine. I get cringe just thinking about it. So I don't want any of my part of my body injured, but when it is, it impacts my whole body. Have you ever seen a kid hurt his hand and limp off the field? You're like, dude, your hand is hurt. Why are you limping? It's like they're mentally just like they're injured.
Yeah, something's wrong.
And it impacts everything. You hurt your back, now your hips and hurting your knee, then you end up with knee surgery. The knee wasn't even the problem. The back problem was the problem, but it impacts the knee. So he uses this great illustration that so rings true in church life, that if you are not using your gift, then the body is injured. So if you're just coming and hanging out and you're not activating using the purpose that God has you never get a chance to discover what the body can look like. In fact, I don't know that our world has ever even really experienced it because of the imperfect world that all of us live in, and all of us have this impact. The culture has its impact on us and an impact on the church. But what would it look like for a church, for all of its members to be operating in their function? It would look healthy.
So I guess given the seriousness of that, there's definitely a recommendation that on Discover Purpose Sunday, which will be the third Sunday of October, and obviously November and so forth, make a point to participate. Like, even if you feel like you know your gift or whatever, like, we should probably all still be going through to make sure we're in the right part of the body.
I encourage you, go to WEAG.org and pre-register. First of all, we need to know you're coming, so help us with that, okay? October 7th is our very first Sunday of Growth Track. It starts with Know God. The second week is Find Family, then Discover Purpose, as we're talking about, and then Make a Difference. And we can go right now to WEAG.org, pre-register. Don't wait. Please join us as we personalize this purpose and find out what it would look like for the church to be operating fully in its purpose.
Yeah, very good. And that you'll find that home banner to do that pre-registration right at the top of the website as well. So we made it very easy for you. You don't have to be clicking around.
Good job. Thank you.
Where is this that Shane's talking about? It's right there as soon as you get to the home page.
Perfect.
So just click on it and go ahead and register it. Shane, for those of us, I mean, let's face it, sometimes God seems to communicate a purpose for a life very quickly. In others, it seems to be a mystery and it might seem to drag out and so forth. You used an example with David receiving a calling, and then he did something that you probably wouldn't expect after getting such a calling that his, 7 brothers didn't get?
Right.
And that is, he just went right back to work. He's like, okay, thanks, I'm going back to work.
Yeah.
What should we in the church be doing in our lives as we're waiting for the fulfillment of this transformation of purpose in our lives?
Yeah, this is the story. If you don't follow or you read the Bible or are not familiar with it, this is David and Goliath. That's that David. He was king of Israel. Before he was king, he was a shepherd, and he was the last of 8 brothers. He was the 8th in the family. And he, like you said, so the prophet comes to anoint the king, goes through the first 7 who we think is going to be the thing, and God says, I don't look on the outside, I look on the heart. And so Samuel has to tell Jesse, the dad, hey, do you have any other boys? And he's like, now we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Yeah.
David's out tending sheep. He's really not fit for this. I don't know if it's going to be a right fit. But it turns out the prophet, he comes, and God says, this is the one. And he anoints him to be king. Now, I've had some promotions in life, but I can't even imagine to go from shepherd in your field to king of the nation. Nobody even knows who you are. That's a massive promotion. And David's next step was, he didn't go be king. He just went out and kept serving. So if you're out there wondering, I drew the application from this. We can learn a lot from David's life, who was a great king. In fact, one of the greatest kings the nation of Israel has ever seen, historically, biblically, any way you want to look at it. And here, he illustrates for us, what do you do when you feel like you have this anointing, we would call it in the church. We just simply mean that God has kind of called you out for this purpose, and he's given you the ability, the gifting, and he's given you the opportunity. And now he's called your number, he's called your name, and it's like, this is it. To serve faithfully in your current role and know that and walk in such a way, because here's what happened. Over the next, and you can read this, you can read about this story in 1 Samuel. It's incredible. Read the story of David. Over the next few, the period of time to come, David hones his skills. In fact, he becomes this great warrior. He kills a lion and a bear to protect his sheep. He's growing in his skill and ability and courage. And we see David and Goliath facing Goliath, but there's a whole lead-up story to that.
Yeah.
His musicianship. What a gifted musician. If you're this gifted that the king of your country says, find the most gifted harpist, and your name comes up and says, this is the guy. You've honed your craft. And he went to work in what he knew. So I would just say this, work with what you've got. Work with what's in front of you. Wherever you've called, it's kind of like, don't leave, your dad would say, don't leave a job until you got another job. Don't go in there and quit because you're frustrated. Set a plan and set yourself up for success in the future. I think calling is the same.
Okay.
Keep working with what's in front of you. God will provide more in front of you.
Yeah.
And when he's ready, that opportunity, and trust me, every experience that you're having right now is needed for the one that you're called to later.
And for those that are perhaps watching who still are just really not sure what is their purpose and so forth, in addition to, of course, going online to WEAG.org and signing up for this first class on October 21st, my guess is there's probably no mistake that it follows Find Family and Small Group Sunday the week prior to that. no doubt there's a correlation.
There's a
between the two.
progression, and that's why this coming Sunday we start with the first growth track, Know
Yeah.
God. And we just want to meet everybody wherever they're at, whatever that means to you. We want to help you discover more about God. We're going to tell you about us and about what we believe, but then we're going to help you progress in that. Finding family is about connecting to other people who are doing the same thing you're doing. You're not alone. We're all trying to find the next step and grow in that relationship, and not just. And God uses other people to do that. That's a great context to then find the place. In fact, within that group of people, within your family, within your church context, as you're growing, you'll have plenty of opportunities to start discovering what it is God's purpose is in your life, and what it is He has planned for you and laid out for you. And it's a beautiful thing for all of us to get to discover that. And we get to just use the church as our practicum to find the place that God would ultimately have us serve, and then we'll find out what it means to make a difference.
Nice.
And that's where we're going to go next week.
Yeah.
So this coming Sunday.
Well, what a relief to those that may be struggling with this. Again, this going back to this age-old question: what's the meaning of life? Why am I here?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that, Shane.
Absolutely.
And again, for those of you that may have missed this past Sunday's sermon, it's available to you on our website. You can just click on the past sermons link right below the header banner. And it's also available on Facebook and on YouTube. We make many ways for you to be able to get to it. Go ahead and watch it. And of course, if you know someone in your life, a family member, a friend, a coworker that could really benefit from this message, please feel free to share that out to them just by clicking the share button. So,
Absolutely.
Shane, we're looking forward to this next week, week number 4, Make a Difference.
Yeah,
Any
me too.
tidbits that you want to spill, teasers? At
Yeah,
this point?
well, I'll just tell you, it has been the most overwhelming thing for me. Jesus didn't just give people purpose. He released them in their purpose. And I'm going to talk about what it looks like to just be set loose in your purpose and carving out a path that only you can carve and that God intended, and what it would look like for our entire world to experience people who are doing this and living this out in their workplace, in their firm, in their office, in their in their school, in the context in their own church. What it would look like to make a difference in the way God intended. I'm really excited about it.
Sounds awesome. Well, please either tune in or show up on site at 10 a.m. this coming Sunday to hear that message, Make a Difference. And you'll be able, of course, watch the sermon again. We'll have it posted that afternoon as well, so you can rewatch at any point.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining. And again, if you come up with any questions later, if you're watching this on demand at another time, please use the comments area to go ahead and ask a question. And you can always, at any point, you can email Shane at weag.org.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
All right. Well, have a blessed day. Thanks for tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right.